sovereignty doesn't actually come out of your birth chart, because your birth chart I regard as your unique sheet of music that will never be repeated in history again, so that says all of us are special. But the pattern is set for this incarnation, but not the frequency. And sovereignty, I think, is part of frequency, not part of the pattern.
Hi, we are James and Hannah Latimer, and welcome to The Whole Life. Recently, we had the pleasure of interviewing master astrologer Pam Gregory. We have been fans of Pam's work since we first met her over 8 years ago. So you can imagine our delight to have a conversation with Pam where we explore the shift in perception of astrology from a fated experience into a more sovereign relationship. We hope you enjoy.
Welcome, Pam. We are absolutely delighted to be in conversation with you here at The Whole Life. We wanted to discuss with you the big favourite topic of ours, which is sovereignty. And we'd love to just dive straight in with you. And if you can share with us, what are you seeing in sovereignty coming out now into the cosmos?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Hannah. It's astrologically, I'm seeing this very much as planets moving into Aries, because Saturn is moving into Aries for the next 2.5 years. Neptune has moved in on the 30th of March and will stay there for another 14 years. So Aries is the sign of the pioneer, going solo. People with strong Aries energy have a very clear sense of, I know who I am.
Yes.
Very simple, direct, I know who I am, and they can just go off and do stuff. They don't have to check in as they just go off and do stuff. I'm going to go climb that mountain. I'm going to go and run a marathon. It's very simple, direct energy. So Aries is one of the two signs I associate most with sovereignty. The other one is Leo, which is, I've arrived, we can start now. But Aries is the very first sign of the zodiac, and because Saturn and Neptune are at 0 degrees, the very first degree of the entire zodiac, and I call that the creator degree. It's like a whole new episode, because you have to go back at least 6,000 years to find when that conjunction happened at 0 of Aries. And so there's a whole sense of, and there are 10 tons of other astrological indicators, a whole new sense of this is a new beginning for humanity. And one of the principal components of that is shifting from victim to sovereignty. Because in this lifetime, and indeed many, many, many lifetimes back through history, we have been trained into being a victim. If you look back in history, it was the kings and the rulers, and the peasants were told what to do and had to work on the land. There was this great sense of inequality. And even if you go way back to ancient Babylon and the Babylonian astrologers, they were very much an elite advising the king, and ordinary people didn't even have access to astrology. And it's only really been in fairly recent times that ordinary people like us have had access to astrology. Even in the Middle Ages, way back in the mystery schools, astrology was one of the key subjects, one of the pillar subjects in the mystery schools, studied by the Essenes. If you wanted to be a doctor in the Middle Ages, you couldn't be a doctor without understanding astrology. So there's always been this sense of the very top people and the very clever people understand this language. And as I say, it's only really, psychological astrology has really only started to come in the last sort of 100 years or so. So it's very recent. And so we've been very much trained in all of our lifetimes to defer to the external, whether that's the church or the monarchy or the government or the corporation or whoever's telling you what to do. We've been extremely well trained into that. And of course, as soon as you defer your power externally, you're in victim. Instantly, you're in victim because you are less than, you're giving away your power. And that is the opposite to sovereignty. And so sovereignty is really, it doesn't have to be all shouty with placards on the street. It is just a quiet shift of, no, I am going to take my power back and I am going to do it my way, quietly, peacefully, but I'm going to follow my own path. I think many of us did that during the lockdown period. We made our own decisions. We didn't just follow what we were being instructed to do necessarily. And, you know, in a personal situation just last week, it would have been extremely easy for me to go into victim, extremely easy. And I had to be extremely strong morally and emotionally to say, nope, I'm not doing that. I'm taking a different course of action. And so that is sovereignty. That is saying, whatever everybody else out there says, whoever they are, government, medical people, whoever they are, I'm going to create my own timeline. I know who I am. I know my power as a co-creator, and I'm going to create my own timeline. And actually, even what the astrology says, I will say, no, I'm going to override that too. I have the power to create a very different timeline because there are infinite possibilities out there, aren't there? Not just one. I mean, we know that, don't we? So that is a real sense of sovereignty. Very quiet, very peaceful, but I'm going to do it my way. Thank you. Thank you for the information. I'm not going that way. I'm going to do it my way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
Beautiful, Pam.
That's hilarious, Pam. That's almost like you're a fly on the wall in my coaching sessions. I mean, the language you've just shared, you know, about helping people move out of victim into sovereignty is so often what I come across in coaching. And so, you know, and so often we're taking people and helping them work out how to move into sovereign relationship. And so to create that real sense of self-autonomy and that ownership of self. So, I mean, that's, wow, what an answer.
And the thing also is taking the permission, which is very interesting. You talking about Aries, this moving into 0 point of Aries. So would you say, therefore, that energy very much assists us in being given, it's like the permission slip when people need to be given permission. Oh, I can take the reins of my own life. Is that very much the energy Aries will bring?
Absolutely. And I think because the whole paradigm of inequality and the elite rich people at the top and the, you know, ordinary people like us at the bottom, because that is cracking and crumbling, that paradigm no longer has the same traction as it did, say, 5 years ago. We're in a very different place with that. And because that is cracking and crumbling, where do you then go? Do you go into, now I'm completely lost because I don't know what my worldview is and I don't know where my anchors and foundations are? Or do you say, this gives me an amazing opportunity to create the life I always wanted, and that's what I'm going to do? You know, it gives you that kind of, and it is an energetic shift as well. It's very much, you know, because those planets are coming out of Pisces, and Pisces, the shadow side of Pisces is very much the victim, actually. It's subservience, it's the victim, it's the martyr. And so the astrology is very much assisting us to give us that backbone, that strength of, I'm going to do it my own way. But it actually helps if you can get together with like-minded people who are thinking the same way. And that doesn't mean we're all going to be arguing that I'm in charge, not at all, because leadership isn't going to be the kind of leadership structure we've had in the past. It's going to be much more horizontal, and it's going to be visionaries and progressives and innovators coming up with ideas, and people around them say, I want to be part of that team. And so we're developing a kind of socioeconomic structure moving forwards where each person will have a greater sense of their own unique essence and operating from a central core of power, but also wanting to feed into the collective. You know, what's my unique contribution, my unique gift to the collective? And I think it can often help, and I've used this analogy in the past, that you think of all of your energy and your creation as a kind of central radio dial in your solar plexus. And as you're sort of waking up in the morning before your feet hit the floor, you set your dial to love, joy, gratitude, compassion, peace, whatever you want. And you say, I am going to dominate my day from my center, from my radio dial with that frequency. And I'm going to do it as a game, and I'll do it as a game for a couple of weeks and see how the dynamics in relationships change when my life energy, my life force comes from me rather than watching the news and then reacting.
Exactly.
If you're taking your cues from the external and then reacting, you're going to be in victim. You're not going to be in sovereignty. But if you switch all that external stimuli and drama and chaos, because it's going to get louder, it's going to get wilder out there, say, no, I'm going to operate from my center, and I'm going to decide what emotion I'm going to dominate my day with. And it's amazing, the ripples that go out. If you go into shops and stores and you've decided to dominate your day with love, you're smiling at people, they're smiling back, and you just feel that kind of rippling out. And that's measurable. I mean, HeartMath have done great work with this to make that measurable, and how it expands the heart's toroidal field, and you literally infect other people with that emotion of love, that feeling of love. And it makes your heart, I'm sure you know all of this, but all of the energy in your body, and every cell of your body, becomes more coherent and healthier, by the way. So there's a win-win-win all the way through this. And so that's that shift from I am receiving information from external authority and then reacting, versus I'm operating from my center, and I'm just going to screen out all the noise, because actually it's crazy anyway. I'm just going to screen out all the noise. I'm not going to listen to it. I'm not going to react to it. I'm not going to go, oh, another big scary thing has just happened, because then I'll be energetically feeding what I absolutely don't want to see more of, and then blaming it for giving me a hard time. And that's
exactly,
crazy way to live, isn't it?
And often it's saying to people, own your own frequency, because if you don't, you're dialing into someone else's, or someone's going to own yours. And so it's taking ownership for how you show up for your day, that frequency. I mean, that
is one of our
choosing love. Yeah.
Favorite phrases, actually. Look after your frequency, because it is your greatest asset. And it really is an asset, and it's coming into that remembrance of we're energetic beings primarily, and that's the equality, that's the parity amongst all of us, isn't it? That energetic state that we're in, and operating from that, then the external is reflected from that inner frequency.
Because the universe, your reality is just a mirror. It's literally a bounce back, isn't it? It's just a mirror to whatever you're broadcasting. And again, do that as an experiment, through your day. But, that is just so true, Hannah, that frequency is going to be our currency. It's going to be recognized as our currency moving forwards. It's your state of being, and I've said it often, your state of being is your absolutely top priority, and everything in your life will cascade from that state of being. Everything. Mm-hmm. And so, forget the external, operate from that. And, I say to people, keep checking in, stick Post-it notes all over your house, your bathroom mirror, your fridge, kitchen cupboards. What's your frequency? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about the really big scary things right now and feeding? How do you know they're even true, actually? No, they're not even made up. How do you know that? Unless it's happening kind of on your doorstep. So come back to you, your energy, your life force. And the astrology is absolutely, Hannah, as you said, a permission slip to step into that sovereignty. 100%.
We work with our clients, as James was saying, with the golden circle of sovereignty as our coaching model, working with people to reclaim their sovereignty. And boundaries are very much a part of that, and taking permission to own your boundaries. What's happening on the cosmos, if this is a reflection of us, how do the planets demonstrate sovereignty, boundary, and the relationship? How do you see that changing, if it's changing at the moment?
Yeah, a great question. It's very interesting. I mean, I am banging a drum on this because so often people, when they're in distress, saying, what are the planets doing to me? And that is totally giving away your power to the planets. And so I don't feel at all comfortable with that in the age we're moving into. So in fact, sovereignty doesn't actually come out of your birth chart, because your birth chart I regard as your unique sheet of music that will never be repeated in history again. So that says all of us are special. But the pattern is set for this incarnation, but not the frequency. And sovereignty, I think, is part of frequency, not part of the pattern.
Very interesting.
That thought has just kind of, but so it isn't your birth chart that determines that. It's the latitude of your free will.
It's choice.
Will determine whether you step into your sovereignty or stay in victim. Because if you stay in victim, your boundaries are going to be super weak. People are going to keep, and it's very interesting. You know, there's someone I know well, who I'm very fond of, but there's been such a repeated pattern in life of giving away power to parents, to boyfriends, to bosses, to family members, and the person who is and I know this is big in your work, Hannah and James, the person externally shifts as the persecutor from sibling to boss to boyfriend to whatever. The outer packaging keeps shifting, but the universe keeps giving the same message of, unless you get out of victim, this bad stuff keeps on happening. And it keeps giving us opportunities to change the pattern, because if you change that inner dynamic of, now I'm stepping into my sovereignty, the dynamics of every relationship shift. I mean, this is your bread and butter, this is your work. Every single relationship will change if you step into your sovereignty. And so it's that shift. But when you're in victim, I think it's so hard to see. You just feel like life is coming at you the whole time. You know, you're the rubber hitting the road, you know, yet another awful thing. Now you've been fired. Now a boyfriend has left. Now another awful thing. Now you're ill, you know, and the doctor's telling you what to do. So it just keeps on running until you can make that inner shift of stepping into your power and say, I'm taking charge of this.
Well, I mean, those outer manifestations, they will just provide more evidence until you decide to actually stop that program. Our kind of motto is, what is your golden lens that you're choosing? Through the sovereign lens, it's golden. And I know you've talked a lot about that. How are you seeing the world? What is your lens? What is your lens? And taking back ownership of, what are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? Who is the company you're with?
Who's owning your attention?
Who is owning your attention? Big time.
100%. Yeah, beautiful. Because, you know, at the beginning of every year, people say, okay, Pam, astrologer, you know, tell us what's going to happen this year. And I increasingly want to say, well, what would you like it to be? What would you like to happen? Because we are co-creators in this. And I actually think astrology is about half the picture. The other half is how we use it as co-creators, co-producers, co-participants in it. Astrology is not 100%. And if we're using it to be 100%, we will tend to be in victim.
Yeah, we've acquiesced our power.
Yeah. And that's so interesting, because so often I'm asking people, what would you prefer? Because everyone knows exactly what they don't want.
Yeah.
But to actually know what they do want is sometimes quite a challenge. And so being able to shift. So in terms of planets, the relationship that we have with planets, how does that co-creation, or how does that co-collaboration actually work from your perspective?
I mean, that is a really, really, really big question. That's a kind of Google
big one.
Question.
How long we've got?
Yeah, Google God question. But essentially, we experience the planetary energies as urges and desires. You know, say if you've got a very strong Mars transit, Mars is about physicality, it's about doing, it's about sport, it's about, you know, I've got to be busy, I've got to be on the go, I've got to go for a run, I've got to go for a workout. It's that kind of energy. So when you're getting a strong Mars transit in your chart, you will feel it as those urges. If you're getting a strong Uranus transit, you will want freedom. I've got to break up these stale patterns in my life. I'm sick of the boss telling me what to do. And I need to be free. I need to be a maverick, because in fact, you have already outgrown the life you're currently living. So that's Uranus. You know, if you're having a Saturn transit, you will feel quite heavy often. You've got a lot of responsibility. You've got a lot of burdens, perhaps. But the way, it's so great to understand the language of astrology, because if, for instance, you were having a Uranus transit and you behaved as if you're having a Saturn transit, where you have to be more obedient and, you know, work hard, etc., and then you get your reward at the end. But if you use your Uranus transit in that way, you're going to miss a lot of creative opportunities. And if you use your Saturn transit as if you're having a Uranus transit and say, you know, I'm just going to bunk off and, you know, I'm not going to turn up to work today and I'm going to do you probably get fired. So it's using the planetary energies. If you've got a kind of astrological vocabulary, you can start to use the planetary energies strategically to say, I understand the symbolism and the energies that are coming at me right now, or not coming at me, correction, coming from me, correction. We'll get onto that in a moment.
Yeah.
And therefore, I understand the language well enough to use them strategically, not just be buffeted by them. Because currently we see them as orbiting rocks out there, and they probably are. But I also think they're a probability wave of consciousness, each of them. And whenever I look at a birth chart, I'm not only looking at the same moment in terms of a map of the heavens, I'm looking at that person's psyche in that moment. It's the same thing. And so a complete I don't do client work anymore, no time, but a complete stranger, has happened many hundreds of times, can come to me and I will be able to understand a lot of their life going back with timings of, what happened when with parents and boyfriends and work and health and blah, blah, blah. And I always did that to check a birth time, to make sure we had the birth time correct. And that if it worked going backwards, it would work going forwards. So it's very validating. But but I am looking at the out there at the same time as looking at the in here. And I think what we're going to find in future moving forwards with astrology, and we're kind of already halfway there with the Hermetic principle and as above, so below, and the macrocosm is just a reflection of the microcosm, that everything, these are just different aspects of our psyche, different frequencies, different probability waves of consciousness, which we can access internally, and will gradually, perhaps over a long time, not even look out to the heavens. Because actually, in Buddhist philosophy, there's only us here. So and that kind of falls out of your ears, I know, and I have trouble with it, but everything kind of comes from within us.
Yeah.
And I think we're really going to start to understand that in a much bigger way. That we are running our own show, our own reality. And that even includes the planetary frequencies.
That's fascinating.
I was going to say, even for those not aware of their chart or the astrological influences, because of the kind of the veil of forgetfulness, or this kind of disconnect, there is a perception of that's not connected, but this is what we're coming into, the remembrance of, no, there's so much connection, because you can't actually be out of time of nature. You are nature, you are of nature. So there's divine timing in everything, even if you're not consciously aware of your chart and the influences, you are of it. You cannot miss out. And this is what's so beautiful to know, because there isn't a feeling of I've missed out. It's happening as it's supposed to.
Yeah, there is such a feeling of everything is interconnected. Everything.
So much. Yeah.
Unconsciousness, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And what's fascinating for me about what you said is the impulses that come through from the planets, that, depending on which planet. And it's often the case where I'll have an impulse, I'll know I want to do something, and then I might be watching one of your updates, and I'm like, it's there. You've just said it. You've just said what I'm being impulsed by.
Yes.
And so it's fascinating for me to see that correlation, because that for me is the collaboration. And often it's the case, you will mention a word or a theme, if you like, and then my clients will say the same thing, and I'm like, this is fascinating. So I've just watched Pam, and then
it's showed up.
It's showing up. It's showing up in real life, because people are talking about it like it's an impulse, and so we'll get these zeitgeist themes coming through, and that's why we wanted to talk to you, because of that's the word sovereignty is really reaching a crescendo in terms of topic, and it's something that we've been working with, but it's just fascinating to explore how these planets are so influential. But then, as you say, it's a collaboration. It's how are we allowing them to be influential, and how are we cooperating with them and with ourselves. You said something else, which is that it's coming from within, and we mentioned the Buddha principle. Can you just talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think that everything actually comes from within us. I think every thought we have, every emotion will appear in our reality. And therefore, because, you know, the universe is just a mirror, so therefore we have to be very, at these times of huge evolutionary jump, probably the biggest evolutionary jump for humanity we've ever had, we have to be so much more conscious and intentional and observant of our thoughts, so we don't get into the old, you know, negative run in, oh, I'm just a loser, it never works for me, because you are creating your tomorrow with that frequency. And so we have to be kind of on it in a much more conscious, intentional way, so that everything we are thinking and feeling is creating the best possible outcome for ourselves, and therefore that feeds into the collective. And, you know, I really think it's good to do it as a game. If you think, well, that's just, you know, a load of tosh, do it as a game for a couple of weeks. Really get really sharp on, you know, people send me stuff all day long, articles to read, videos to watch. But if within a few minutes or seconds even, if I think this is taking my frequency down, boom, I'm gonna stop it and switch it off. So no, not my timeline. I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna listen to the birds, I'm gonna sit in the garden, bare feet on the grass, think how lucky I am to be alive. You know, I'm gonna flick it, I'm gonna switch it. And so in that way, I'm very, because, you know, I talk about this stuff all the time, I'm very aware that actually everything is within us, every single thing in our reality. And yes, we then overlap with the consensus reality out there, but equally we are influencing that too. And, you know, that doesn't always mean, you know, I wish it did, wish astrologers had perfect lives, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a perfect life, but you have a much more conscious life. And when tough stuff happens, you can often see it in your chart, but you can see the bigger, deeper meaning in it. You know, for instance, when I went through my annus horribilis, which was just ghastly in 205, you know, I was leaving my marriage, all my dogs had died, my mother had been sectioned, I was teaching management people in India, I'd been incredibly sick for the last month, but I had to keep going because that was the schedule they booked into, you know, just on and on and on and on. And it was very tough because I had transiting Pluto over my ascendant at the time, which is about kind of death and rebirth to the marriage, death and rebirth to my identity. But it was so helpful to know that it wasn't just the universe giving me random kind of smacks around the head. This had a much deeper meaning of, you are now stepping into your power, because Pluto transits are always about empowerment, ultimately. I mean, they're linked to the myth of Persephone. So when Persephone was kidnapped and taken down to Hades, and she crossed the Styx, SDX, you know, STYX, and, you know, it was all very scary. And, you know, that wasn't a bunch of laughs either. So you go into a period of stress and darkness, but then she came back up to the light. And so the message of Pluto transits is always, if you understand the astrology, is always about your empowerment. And I mean, thank goodness I left my marriage, because I'm not sure I'd still be here now if I didn't. But my life, that was the pivot point for everything that's followed, and all my astrology work, etc., etc. So I'm deeply grateful for that. But 205 was not, you know, there weren't many tinkly laughs in 205 for me.
It's not sort of rose tinting things, but being able to see what's happening and pivot towards, okay, where's this going? What's the end game here? And, you know, that
and
hero's,
to what you
and
prefer.
pivot to what you prefer, and the kind of the hero's journey of going into the ordeal and the dark cave and coming out with the elixir and coming back into the ordinary life. I'm sure you're aware of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, which we're all on. Day to day, we even have the hero's journey, and over the lifetime, and the chart is all about the hero's journey of coming in, the trials and tribulations, what are the gifts, what's the learning, and coming out, just like Richard on the Jinkies, you know, through the shadows into the gifts and the cities, the higher octaves. So it's a song and a dance, isn't it? The complete cosmos, us, it, out, in. It's a involution, evolution, as Richard.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. I loved it. I hadn't heard that word involution before, but I'm quoting Richard quite a lot on that, because it isn't just a forward evolution, as he says so beautifully. It's a remembrance of that ancient wisdom. It's a going back into what we've lost as so-called sophisticated, modern people. But boy, we've lost so much wisdom. And that's coming back online now too.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And in the sense that, you speak about being conscious, and that's how I often see sovereignty, is that it's the conscious I.
Yeah.
And so we're moving into that conscious I-ness to then become conscious we,
as families,
as a collective,
collectives,
and then moving into the sovereign us, the sovereign, the sovereign society.
Beautiful.
But it
Thanks
has
so much, James. Yeah.
But it has to start with the individual conscious I. I talk about conscious leadership. We've got to be much more self-aware, much more owning of our attention, and just being in sovereignty. That's, for me, is how sovereignty looks and feels. And so, in terms of the planets, you were speaking about the impact of 2005. How are the planets working with us to now take us? Because you talk about the new human, and we're moving into a huge jump, quantum leap.
Yeah.
What's happening there?
Wow. Yeah. How many days have you got on that? I mean, it's so fascinating. And, I was starting to speak about this really a couple of years ago. And what I tend to do, because I'm such an old hack at this, I trust the astrology and then I wait and see the manifestation because I trust it so much. I know something's going to manifest. So I filmed a video called Metamorphosis for Humanity, and essentially it's a kind of wonky triangle of geometry. But when planets are in specific geometry to each other, that's when they become kind of active together, as it were. And so we have three, what I was talking about there, so keeping it simple, was there's Pluto, the planet of transformation, which is, you can imagine as a tree that dies in the wood and falls and rots down. So it dies, but it becomes fertile soil for new life. So it's death, transformation, and rebirth in a different form. So that's transformation. It's aspecting another dwarf planet called Homer, who is linked in myth to the Hawaiian goddess of fertility. And in the myth, she is said to be able to birth babies from all over her body, to regenerate herself from an old crone to a young maiden. So we're all looking forward to that. Very much a symbol for, turning our age back and our health back, etc. But she isn't just a symbol of transformation. She's about, a bigger form of regeneration. So that applies to us as humans, but it also applies to Gaia herself going through her own regeneration. And then those two, Homer and Pluto, are in geometry to a dwarf planet, pretty much our furthest out dwarf planet we know, 11,400-year orbit called Sedna. And they're variations on the myth, but in shorthand, Sedna, she's now an Arctic sea goddess. But she married inappropriately and she begged her father to come and rescue her from the marriage. And they set off in his kayak and a storm blew up. And in order to save himself, the father threw his daughter Sedna out of the kayak. And when she tried to save herself by hanging on to the kayak with her fingers, he chopped her fingers off. So the patriarchy does not shine in this myth. And so she floated down to the deep icy ocean and transmuted into a sea goddess, and her fingers became exquisite new sea creatures of dolphins and whales and turtles. So that is not just a transformation, it's a complete metamorphosis. It's a complete change of state. And that is what I think we're going through spiritually, energetically, but also physically, because then, Richard Rudd pops up and talks about the new human. And Lee Harris pops up with his new book talking about the future human. I may have got those the wrong way around, but essentially they're saying the same thing. And Richard, I had that great conversation with him. He was seeing that metamorphosis beginning, I think it was this January, the 30th. I'm not familiar with gene keys, when Pluto was going through gate 41 or something. And he said that was the first step into this metamorphosis, which will become eventually the water nymph to the dragonfly. So, and then I listened to other people like Cryon and Greg Braden, and they're talking about the activation of the 24th chromosome. And you listen to many other people who are talking about the shift from carbon to crystalline. And what I love is where science and spirituality come together, but they're all saying the same thing.
Yeah.
This is a spiritual shift, it's a biological shift, it's an energetic shift. But in order to do it optimally, we've got to get a grip on our frequency and our state of being. You know, we don't want to mess up what is the, the opportunity of all of our lifetimes. You know, this is a big deal.
Is it, Pam, is it a cycle we've been before in terms of the golden age and the Kali Yuga and the gold, or actually are we going somewhere uncharted? Is this new?
Great question. And from what I understand, and it's partly due to, well, okay, great question. I'll answer that first. I think if you go back, 12,000 years and follow the Yuga cycle, the Vedic Yuga cycles, there appears to have been a kind of earth cataclysm every 12,000 years. We're aware of Atlantis, and as I understand it, the fall of Atlantis happened because they started messing with too much blending of technology and human. That's my understanding. And they got really quite arrogant in that. And that led to the fall of Atlantis. So, and Lemuria flooded. I'm not quite sure why in that case Lemuria, because that was probably the most perfect civilization we've ever known. But we continued up to now to go around the same tram tracks, the hamster wheel, reincarnation, round and round. But from what I'm seeing in the astrology and from what I'm understanding from other people, we've broken out of the tram tracks. It's no, I'm going so goosebumpy.
Wow.
It's no longer same old, same old. We've broken out of that cycle of reincarnation. And now it's up to us as the family of Gaia, to feed into what James was saying, to create something incredibly beautiful, very loving, where every living being has respect. There's no sickness, there's no poverty. We have the ability to create that. And we are starting to see more and more people with the increased psychic sensitivity are starting to see other dimensions. We're starting to discover new sea creatures. Just yesterday, actually, I posted that there's been a new discovery all around an underwater volcano of about 1 million eggs that are 20 inches long. And nobody knows what this is about. So we're going to have new discoveries of the deep seas, because I'm following Sedna's myth there. We know very little about the deep seas and all of the medicines that the deep seas could provide for us, some very nutrition dense food from the plant food. Maybe about 9 months ago, there was an underwater mountain range that had never been known, discovered off the coast of Chile. And that has got all kinds of new plant and sea life that, we didn't even know that mountain range was there. Recently, a huge iceberg the size of Chicago broke off from the Antarctic ice sheet. And underneath it, a whole ecosystem was revealed with new sea species there as well. So so this is the part of the new biology of Gaia, that she constantly evolves with her life force to produce new species. And as our consciousness expands, we are now able to see them. They were probably always there, but we didn't have the capacity to see them because our consciousness was too limited. There's a wonderful guy who lives on, I believe, Hawaii. He's called Keone Hanulai. He carries on the Mu lineage. And he said, Lemuria was never lost. It's just we haven't been able to see it because humanity fell from love. But once we reconnect to love, pockets of Lemuria, the actual land masses, will start to reappear.
Wow.
I mean, isn't that sensational?
Well, that gives me goosebumps.
It's the ultimate sovereignty, isn't it? We're stepping into sovereignty on another level. And the lens, as you talked about, the lens is changing. So it's peeling back the scales from the eyes to really see. And this is what's so beautiful as well with the sovereignty, because rather than kind of the old paradigm of the heterarchy, where there's so much hierarchy, I'm sorry, you're right, of chasing to be seen or approved by another, the sovereign act of seeing yourself then our eyes, then we have true sight, don't we? Because we see the divinity, which is the perfect blueprint within everybody. And so then the sight changes, as you said. And then because of that frequency shift, we're able to then really see what's before us.
And get excited, because I think so often kind of panic and anxiety is actually quite similar to excitement. It's kind of like the other side of the coin. So, you know, if you get into kind of, you know, anxiety and panic, try and flip it to what is coming down the track. But it is much easier if you've got friends on the same frequency with the same worldview and the same, who can support you. And if you're having a bit of a dippy day, you can call on them and say, hey, you know, you need to speak to me to get me back on track. That is so. Don't live like a hermit. Try and connect to people, whether it's physically and hug and laugh, or whether it's online, to keep that strong feeling of we're a family of frequency and we're free and changing the world. Because all the meditations we do, and I mean, Lynn McTaggart is the queen of this. She has a tab on her website called Evidence of all of the mass meditations that she's run, and I've joined in occasionally in the past. Actual measurable evidence of what those meditations have done. And I think going forwards, and Lee Harris actually said this to me in a recorded conversation we had, he said, going forwards, there will be evidence, it will be measurable of what all these people all over the world running meditation, small or large, how they are changing the collective timeline. And that's just invisible energy for free.
Yeah.
That's our power.
It's the flip side, isn't it? The same coin, spirituality and science, where we start to bring the unit, you know, bring them back into unity, which is sovereignty for us is a kind of another word of describing that union, the unity. It's like the yoga unit. Sovereignty is a remembering and a union, a coming back into the wholeness of ourselves. Beautiful, Pam. So beautiful.
No, it really, and if you're, you know, connecting with someone because you're having a slightly challenging day, it doesn't mean you've given away your sovereignty. You are just in a period where you need a bit of a recharge from somebody who understands you very well, and then whoosh, off you go again.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean you have to be perfect, because we do have, I had a very big challenge last week. We do have challenges, but actually that really makes you get conscious, of, am I just living this theoretically, or am I walking my talk? It really, really does. and and so the challenges come as a kind of, how are you doing?
Yeah.
How are you doing? Are you just living it in theory, or is this the real deal?
Like you say, Pam, wisdom comes through the challenge, doesn't it? It doesn't come through an easy breeze. Yeah, I've heard you say many times.
But, we've got to find joy in this, because I just think there's so much that's kind of almost unimaginably exciting, because there's no rehearsal for this. We haven't done it before. We haven't left the tram tracks. And so I think the way we're going to operate energetically is just so different. We're going to be much more telepathic. We're going to have much stronger healing abilities. We're going to come together in love and joy and sharing. There's going to be no harm to any other living being. We will eat less. We'll eat more plant-based. We'll probably get energy direct from the sun rather than via the food. Don't try that at home unless you know what you're doing. It's that kind of a real understanding that we are energy beings. We are light bodies. We are energy beings. We're light bulbs, rather than this kind of dense meat suit that we think we've been moving around in. And that will change everything. And I think all the medicine of the future, and it's available already, is based on frequency, energy and frequency, not drug based. We're going to move well away from that. And if I look at the glyph for Aquarius, it's a double jaggedy line, and that's kind of, the symbol for electricity, energy, frequency. So that's the paradigm moving forwards, how we create from light, how we create from sound. And it's very exciting, I think, where we're headed.
And it's also in talking about the journey of sovereignty and reclaiming that inner authority individually. It's also then we're able to then properly show up and collaborate as the united we, the us, when otherwise it's a fragile we. If we haven't reclaimed that sovereignty individually, then that structure isn't strong. So that has to happen individually to us before that proper unification, and also then trusting us together as a collective, because we're in our individual suits, but actually we're doing this together, all of us united. So it's trusting where we're all moving together.
I think the family of Gaia is a really, really lovely way to do it. But I mean, you guys have a wonderful job because you're helping people live bigger, better lives. So you've got what a great job that is. You're helping people lead bigger, better lives. But it's almost, and I'm sure you're doing this in all your coaching sessions. That you're acting as buddies for people who may have been in victim. So, if they're sharing a particular situation where they felt a bit battered again, what happened to your frequency? How did it do? I'm sure you're doing this all the time in your sessions. So you're kind of a frequency check-in buddy. And I think it's really helpful whether people are coming to you with the wonderful work you're doing, or whether it's just a mate down the road or at the end of a Zoom call, to have a buddy to keep checking on you. So where did you slip? Why did you slip back into victim? What caused that trigger?
Yeah, what was the
And
trigger?
how could you have handled that situation differently if you're going to stay in your sovereignty? And what do you think would have happened if you stood your ground and stayed in your sovereignty? What could have possibly unfolded? And can you take that course of action next time you run into that same person?
And I think we all need that accountability, Pam. Like you were saying, be aware of who you're with, the tribe, the people around you, the company you keep, because we need that accountability to rise up, don't we, into our.
And I mean, just going off on a slight tangent in terms of the company you keep, I do work with companies, and so who are still hierarchical, very much so, but are exploring, and I'm obviously encouraging hierarchy and taking on more of a sovereign mindset of being individually responsible to then be collectively responsible. How is that showing up in the astrology?
In terms of conscious leadership.
Yeah.
In business.
Yeah, it's very much, I think, Pluto in Aquarius, because Aquarius is the sign of the people, egalitarianism, humanitarianism, more horizontal social structure, greater equability, not equality necessarily, but greater equability. And because I've done a lot of research going backwards in history, because Pluto has a 248-year orbit, so it was last there in 1777 to 1798. So look at that period, and back in the 1500s and back to the 1200s, look at all those periods. And every time the big theme was a weakening of top-down authority, whether that was the church, the monarchy in this modern life, the corporation, the boss at work, that autocratic structure of I am telling you what to do. And every time, and in some cases, it took the American Revolution or the French Revolution in 1798 to kind of get the monarch beheaded and shift France out of a monarchy to become a republic. But if we look at France, because that was the beginning really of democracy that spread right across Europe and the Western world at that time, some question marks about that, but we're back in that cycle again. But that was the time when new small businesses started up, artisan businesses. People came together to start small farms, that kind of enterprise. And it was the very, very beginning of a middle class, which had never, ever happened before because it was the rulers and the ruled. And so that became a very solid middle class movement right across Europe. So we are at the beginning of a very strong freedom movement. And the way I see it working, and I'm posting stuff literally every day, I tend to do it on Facebook because there's some great sources to share from, but it's literally people, and often school children, who are bringing in these incredible innovations. I often quote there are 3 African school children that have discovered they can provide electricity for their village via their urine. And it must be the urea in
Yeah.
their urine that's doing that. And there's another small company that's set up that has discovered that if they build these bamboo towers, there's a way of producing free energy from those. And there's some very clever people doing it, and incredibly young people finding ways to produce free energy, solutions for pollution. There's a chap who started when he was very, very young called Boyan Slat, who set up a non-profit making organization called Ocean Cleanup. And essentially he developed a huge, big scoopy thing. He wants to clean up 99% of floating pollution on the world's oceans. And he's got loads of volunteers doing this. So, and I could talk forever about this, but I mustn't rant too much. But so there are a lot of innovators, pioneers, visionaries who are developing these amazing ideas, often in their back garage. And people see these ideas and say, I want to be part of that. I have some scientific knowledge. I want to help that guy, free of charge, because we're moving into an area where, we will give time freely, and help to create that vision globally or widespread. And things like free energy, or, we discovered ages ago, but, it hasn't been available for us recently. That's going to come back online in a really major way. Because there are going to be so many pockets of people springing up with these ideas, it's going to be hard to keep all those pockets down.
The rainfall of inspiration.
Yeah, and there's a lot of it. And so in terms of moving into this new time, the impulse that we are receiving from the planets, you talk about the photonic belt and photonic light and solar flares and that kind of thing. Is it that we are using, or are we working with that type of energy to change our blueprint, or is our blueprint working with that to create the evolution or the involution?
Yeah, beautiful question, James. It appears to be a combination for humanity as an activation of our time capsule, like the acorn starts to grow into the oak tree, or the caterpillar says today's the day I'm going to start to go into mush and become the butterfly. So it's an inner time capsule that has been prophesied by the Hopi and the Mayans and the Quero and many ancient peoples that this is the time. And but in addition, we are getting our cake ingredients, if you like, from the cosmos. And apparently there's more light on the Earth than we've ever had before. And this very high frequency light, the Earth is passing through the photon belt. We only do that about every 12,000 years, or give or take 500. And that very high frequency light and energy is reactivating dormant strands of our DNA. And so we are going to be, it's going to be very interesting to watch our birth charts, because it's like our birth charts have been operating in kind of a flat 3D. They are going to start to operate in a much more multi-dimensional way, like a multi-dimensional jigsaw. So it's going to be fascinating for me as an astrologer to see how the astrological archetypes become just a myriad of information, whereas they've been much more limited in the time I've been studying them, probably in many lifetimes. Am I making sense with that? So we've got an inner time capsule in here that was ready to activate, and it's being activated, surprise, surprise, by these very high frequency cosmic energies coming in right now. And we're in peak of solar cycle 25. So, they're just bombarding us all the time at the moment. And although they can be quite destabilizing, we feel dizzy or insomnia or, extreme exhaustion or whatever, the more we try and welcome them in as cake ingredients for our evolution, welcome in the light, the more we will be able to embody, to hold on to edge us closer and closer to becoming a multidimensional light body, which is where we're headed from this, very dense, what we've been in this lifetime. So I think we're starting to move into a time where, I just lose vocabulary, as I say, because we've never done it before. We've just never. But I think I think nature is we're going to see it with heightened senses. We're going to feel it humming. We're going to feel trees and plants and animals speaking to us. Everything is going to be kind of heightened. It's almost like those movies that, the animation shows that kind of thing. I think we're going to start, and many people are already who are very sensitive. They are really tuning in to that level of feeling that life force coming through nature in every form and blending with it and feeling part of that oneness. And I can feel it to some extent when I have my walks in ancient woodland, because all those spring leaves are out, and I just think, wow, like a child driving everybody crazy. Look at the green, look at the, don't I really? But I can feel that life force. It's electric, and people are way more gifted than I am at feeling that. But we are all kind of on that road to connect with the oneness of nature, and therefore we won't be able to have wars or see people in poverty, or our instinct will be, I want to help you, I want to share what I've got. And that's where we get to the more equal society, because I will want to give to help you, because I feel I'm part of you. We're all part of each other.
Oh God, I pray for that day. That's beautiful.
But the more we can welcome that in, as opposed to watching the nightly news and thinking, oh my God, that's why our focus and attention and being so disciplined about it is so incredibly vital to keep us on track. And you acting as kind of, with all your coaching and being kind of frequency buddies, is just so incredibly precious.
Thank you, Pam. That's
amazing,
beautiful.
Pam.
One other question I wanted to ask you. We've kind of, over the centuries, kind of mapped the cosmos, if you can call it a mapping of the cosmos, but we haven't really explored so much the oceans. And I always had this wondering whether we would discover that as above, so below, we would actually start to map the constellations in the oceans. Is there anything coming out in the planets about that kind of?
It is absolutely beautiful, because somebody else, I can't remember, said exactly that to me the other day.
Oh,
exactly that. And if I'm not wrong, and I don't think I'm misquoting her, is that lovely Kelly Kolodny, who I've had a conversation with, who channels Archangel Raphael. And if I'm not, I hope I'm not misquoting her, but I think she said, Archangel Raphael said exactly that.
Interesting.
It said no, because she's a deep Arctic sea goddess. And I think we are going to discover an awful lot of the further out there, but an awful lot of the deep, because we know so little. We know so little about the oceans, and the primary water under the mantle of the earth contains more water than all the oceans that we know about. There's so much for us to discover. We're just at the very, very beginning of that.
Yeah. That's so exciting. And your conversations with Veda as well. I mean, water's going to be, all eyes on the water for many reasons in the near future.
Well, I mean, because we often talk about, our own water, the water in our body, and how that's...
And how we speak.
And so we are literally frequency. We are electromagnetic beings. We are frequency. Speak nicely, speak kindly. But, but it's all the feeling as well. And so it's... water is going to be huge. I can see that.
Massive. And I think Veda's work is contributing just zillions to that. I mean, she really is taking that. She's taught us so much, not just about water, but about consciousness. It's beautiful, her work.
Pam, it's been so wonderful hearing you. Thank you so much for all your sharing. We deeply appreciate everything you do, and your energy and your enthusiasm, and just your
joy
and relentless joy of upliftment. Beautiful. And bringing hope
and encouragement to everybody.
So bless you. Thank you so much. I've loved it, actually. We've covered a lot of ground, and it was a wonderful conversation. And I just thank you for all that you are doing in the world, Hannah and James, and helping so many people step back into their sovereignty. So precious.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.